Welcome back. Here's part number 2 of Lightroom CC video. This part will cover how to import photos, which is a process of opening, if you will, or bringing the photos inside of the application so we can then continue with the fun part, which is to edit the photos. So, all right. So here we go. So the first step is to launch Lightroom CC. So however you do that, just hop on over to LRCC, your Lightroom CC, which is LR icon. It should look something like this, except yours will be blank, unless you've already added some photos to it. Yours will be empty. So here's how we get started. Let's walk through the interface just a little bit. On the left-hand side, you have your different activities. You have your home. There's some cool learning stuff in here on the home page, so you can learn some things. You can discover new artists. You can have some tips and tricks and things to do, tutorials from other people. You can get inspiration here as well. Next down, you have the library, which those books icons, that's your stuff. Those are your photos. It's stored in a library. And then below that is how you can share photos with yourself or with other people. We won't cover that right now. On the left here, the next column over are your albums, which are groups of photos. And then across the top, you have notifications, how to share. This icon up at the top is your cloud icon. It shows you synchronization and things like that. I'll get over on this stuff in a minute. Those are our tools for editing, as are these down here at the bottom. So step number 1, let's import some photos. Here's how you do that. It's pretty simple. In the top left here, you will see a big plus button. So it's over here. Come on, my cursor, get big. There it is. It's that plus button at the top left. So click that once, and you want to browse to add more photos. So click on Browse. It should take you to a window to your computer, your drive, your computer. And my photos are on my desktop that I want. I want those LR sample photos. So I'm going to go to my desktop here, and I have my imports folder. Then I want LRC. So here's something to be aware of. At this level of selection, you're not selecting individual photos. You're selecting a folder full of photos. You're not selecting the individuals. You'll do that at a later step, and I'll show more about that in a later video. But for now, we're going to just click on the Review for Import. So click Review for Import. It'll show you the photos that are in that folder. These are the 3 photos we want. And they have a blue check in the top left corner. That's what we want. So in the middle top here, so don't click Add to 3 photos yet. Don't do that yet. One of the very important things Lightroom helps you do is organize your photos, which helps you in a year from now be able to find them, or in a little while, a month, be able to find them. So I want to organize my photos, so I'm going to do that by adding them right now to an album. So it says Add to Album here in the middle top. So you're going to click that pull down and choose the option to create a new album. It should be the one at the top. If you have albums in here, you will see them alphabetically. As you can see, I have lots. Because I'm organized. So I'm going to click a new here at the top, and I want to make a new album, and I'm going to call this Lightroom CC 1. If you can call it something like that, that would be great. A name that makes sense for you. So I organize all my projects inside of Lightroom by a name that makes sense for the project. So I'm clicking Create Now. Now, nothing's happened yet. It's just said, go ahead and go ahead and add these photos to this album. Now, when I click on Add 3 photos, it will now import them to Lightroom. All right, so now that I'm all done, I just click on Lightroom CC1, the album I just created, and I will see my photos ready to be edited. So you will each of the photos has this little circle down at the bottom right. That means it's synchronizing them, which means it's uploading them to the cloud. Once that blue circle's gone, that means the synchronization is complete. So we're going to start with this photo. The photo of the door this is in London. All these photos are from my London trip in 2018. And here's how I approach editing photo. So one of the first things I do is look around the edges of the photo and notice if there's anything that just feels awkward or is a distraction. In this case, I don't really have any distractions, but I have a little awkwardness. And here's the awkwardness in this photo. The awkwardness in this photo is near the top. And it's above the pillars, there's a bar of gray, and then there's also just that really thin stripe of darker gray. And that bugs me because it feels like, when you're in a room and your head feels like it's hitting the ceiling and you feel like claustrophobic, that's how this feels to me a little bit. So I want to fix that by getting rid of it. So I'm going to do that with the crop tool. And the crop tool is on the right-hand side of that thin strip over there. It's the second tool from the top, excuse me. And if you put your mouse over it, it will tell you what the tool is. It says crop and rotate. So also it'll give you the keyboard shortcut for that, which is the letter C. So if I just hit the letter C, watch this. If I just hit the letter C, it changes to the crop and rotate. It tells you a little about how to use the tool if it's the first time you're using it. And but that's what you have me for. So I'm going to click on Got It and rock and roll from here. So with the crop tool, we have options here. We can keep the aspect ratio at the original, which means the ratio of the width to height. And that's usually how I crop. If you wanted to, you could change to 1:1, which would be a square, these different kind of standard print sizes. And down here at the bottom, we have standard screen sizes and dimensions, proportions, something like that. So I'm going to do original just to keep it relatively simple. And then I'm going to start at one of the corners. So that's how you change this, is you can just drag a corner or a side. And since it's original, when I drag a side, it also does the top and bottom. Normally it would just do the side. But since I'm keeping the width and height relationship the same, it is doing both the width and the height. So I'm going to start at a corner. I'm going to click at the top one and just drag down, and I'm going to drag until I basically hide all but the bottom part of the pillar top, those columns there. Now you'll notice, since I started from the top right, now I'm skewed. My photo is not in the middle anymore where I want it. So I'm going to click in the middle here. Now you'll notice the cursor in the middle of your screen is a hand. It's called the grabber hand or something like that. That's what I've heard it called. And you click there and you can just now move this around. I can move it any which way, but I do like the bottom here. So I'm going to keep that. And I'm going to try and center up. So that line that's at the top is the center. The middle of the doors is the center. So I'm going to pay attention to that. Now over here, you'll notice I've got at the top left. I know this is picky. But that's what makes photos go from okay to, ooh, that's really good, because it's the attention to detail that's really, really important. So up here at the top left, I'm just going to click and pull down a little bit more. In cropping, oftentimes when you fix one thing, sometimes you make a new problem, so you have to still keep looking around the edges and make sure there's not something that bugged you. So I like the way the crop looks, and I'm going to go ahead and say I'm done. So I'm just going to hit the return key or the enter key, and that will make it happen. And there we go. So now I have a new look at this photo. Now, here's one of the really cool things about Lightroom. Both this version, the CC, Lightroom CC, and the classic version. You don't have to save anything. Lightroom is constantly saving as you go. So I can go to the next photo. Let's just say I want to do this one now, and then go back, and it saved my changes. Okay, saved my changes. So that's kind of cool. So you can quit without saving. There's no save in Lightroom. Also, it's never going to change the original photo. The original photo will always be there in wherever I saved it originally. And what's here right now doesn't really, well, it kind of exists in the CC version because it's making edits as it goes, but you can always go backwards to the original version. So, okay, so let's do some edits. So again, what I want to do with my edits is ask the question, what needs fixing? What is missing? What's going on here that I feel like should be addressed? And here's my attitude on that. I prefer my photos to feel like they haven't been edited a ton. Like that, the first thing you notice isn't the edit, but the photo. What I do with my edits, though, is a couple of things. I'll correct mistakes or the technical deficiencies in a photo, but I'll also add a little bit of me into the photo, which we'll get into farther down the road in Lightroom 2 when we do the second demonstration of these features. Also want to do in these video is I'm doing what's called the basic edits. And the reason I call it basic edits because in Lightroom Classic, there's a panel called the basic panel. Those controls are spread out a little bit differently in Lightroom CC, but those are the ones I'm going to work on right now, and we'll have some fun with that. So, all right, so here we go. So the edits start, the options you have are starting with light. And inside of light, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 controls. And if you mouse over them, it will tell you what it is, what it will do. So we have exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. Pretty familiar stuff. So when I look at this photo, one of the things I'm noticing is it feels a little dark. And what I want to do with my photos is have it convey a feeling like I felt when I created the photo. Okay, so when I was taking this photo, creating this image, it was a great time. We were having fun. This building was quite impressive. It felt warm and somewhat inviting, even though it's kind of old school and a little formal looking. It did feel welcoming. And this doesn't feel that. And there's a couple reasons. One is it's dark. Two is the color's a little blue. So we have a reaction, an emotional response when we look at images, both to lots of things, but to color and brightness. So we'll start with brightness first. So exposure, let's walk through how this works. So if I drag to the right, everything gets really bright. If I drag to the left, everything gets really dark. So which way do I want to go? I'm going to start by going a little brighter. How much? I'm just looking at the image until it feels about where I want it. Now, exposure is kind of like the big hammer. It's doing everything. The whole image is getting brighter. The whole image is getting darker, which is okay. But generally, I don't move this one very much at first, unless I really made a mistake, which happens sometimes. So I'm right now at about plus 0.5. If you want to follow along, feel free to make your own edits on this photo as well. But if you want to follow along and see if you can get the same results, there you go. Contrast. What contrast does, that's the next one down, that basically makes the brights brighter and the darks darker when you go to the right, and so everything gets more punchy. And on the left, everything gets a little more towards gray. So let me show you that first. So going all the way to minus 100 on the left, everything is less black and white. It's more gray. If you go this way, the whites are whiter, the blacks are blacker. So there we go. Which way do I want to go? On architecture and things with texture, sorry, I can't talk today, I tend to go and increase contrast. How much? Again, photo by photo basis, somewhere around 20 maybe on this one. Yeah, exactly 20. So exposure and contrast, if you've ever worked with a photo editing program before, you've probably played with those. The next one down the next four are the really powerful ones. They give you control over just certain ranges of tones, which gives you lots of flexibility. So let me show you that next. So we have highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. So highlights and whites, those are the bright parts of the image. Shadows and blacks are, as you would think, the darker parts. So let's try starting with highlights. So I'm dragging to the right, which will make the highlights brighter. And you'll see that's the bright part of the door, the bright part of the two columns, and a little bit in that window above the door. So which way do I want to go? I'm going to go brighter, but how much? Kind of right about here, which is plus 23. Let's do whites next, because I like to do highlights and whites together. I wish they were together on the thing, but they're not. So whites, wow, that's making a pretty big difference if I increase things, and it's too much for what the mood I want. It feels like a special effect. So which way do I want to go? We'll go a bit brighter, so I'm about plus 30 on the whites. Now the shadows, let's see what that does. By the way, feel free to pause this and play around a little bit to see which way you want to go with this image, to see how it feels to you. Shadows, so if I go to the right, the shadows, which are underneath the arch there and the darker parts of the door, some of the dark parts of the door will get brighter, and I can hide things. So this is hiding and showing different parts of the image. I'm going to go a little negative. I want to increase a little bit of the drama here, because drama is mysterious, right? So if something's mysterious, it's a little more dramatic, and the way you create mystery is by hiding things a little bit. Not completely, so I don't necessarily want to go to minus 100, but a little bit. So we're going to just increase the shadows. I'm about minus 30 there, because I want to create some of that sophistication and drama, mystery. All right, skipping down to the blacks now. The blacks will, if you go to the right, it brightens the very darkest parts of the image, which are, again, parts of the shadows and on the door. If I go to the left, it darkens things the same tones. Too much, but in the right direction. So I do want to go a little more serious here. So I am going to go a little more dramatic. So we'll go about minus 20 on the blacks. I like that look. So my tone is feeling, my exposure is, the light is feeling pretty good. I've changed it quite a bit, but I do like how this looks. So the next section is color. So the color I want to play with, I want to work with. I have 4 controls in here. I have the temperature and tint, which are connected to what's called white balance, which we'll talk about soon in class. And then vibrance and saturation, which are the richness of the color. So the temperature, let's start there. Temperature is on the left, it makes things more blue, which is correcting for something that's too orange. And on the right, it makes things more orange, which is correcting for things that are too blue. This was a cloudy-ish day, or we were in shade at least here. So it's going to be a little blue. So I'm going to go to the right and make it more orange. Now that's a little too much. At least I think it is. If I go to the left, also too much. Usually for the temperature slider, I don't move it very much from where it is. So I'll go a little to the right here. How much? Again, I'm just looking at the image until it feels the way I want. So I'm at about 5,438 degrees Kelvin. We'll cover that when we get to properties of light in another lecture. The tint slider on the left is going to make things more green. On the right, more pink. Which way to go? Usually, not always, but usually if I go warmer with the temperature, I'll also go a little warmer with the tint. And you'll see it's pretty easy to get to a place where it starts to look like a special effect or an Instagram filter, which is not really what I want. I want to be a little more subtle. So I'm going to go maybe to about plus 10 on the tint. So it's a little warmer on the pink side than the cooler on the green side. So what this does by warming up the photo, with warmer tones, we tend to associate emotions like happiness and energy and feelings like welcoming and things like that. If you go to the cooler tones, it would be quieter, maybe sad, maybe not as welcoming feeling. And I wanted this to feel welcoming, which is why I went to the warmer tones. All right, vibrance. Next one down. Vibrance. we're dealing with the richness of colors here, so the intensity. So Vibrance is going to make the colors richer, especially the ones that are not super rich already. So in this case, it's going to be some the warmer tones. You'll see if I crank it up to plus 100, it gets, I mean, look at all the color that's in those columns now even. If I go to minus, it takes most of the color out, but there's still just a hint of some of the reds and browns in the door. Which way do I want to go? I kind of have a habit of going to about plus 30 with Vibrance. It's a look I like. And I'll tell you why, because it's connected to saturation coming up next. So I'm just going to turn it to 30. Again, you can choose a different value if you want to get to see what you think with this stuff going on here. Saturation, that's the richness of all the colors. So if I crank it up to plus 100 on this photo, it gets to be a bit much. It's too much. If I go minus 100, it basically creates a black and white image, which is by taking all the color out of all the colors. I don't want that. And when we do black and white, I'll show you a better way to do it. But what I do want to do is, again, to accompany that plus 30 on the Vibrance, usually what I do is go to about minus 10 on the saturation. And that's kind of because of how my camera captures things. Your mileage may vary with your camera. Some cameras are a little richer in colors, and I kind of tend to like quieter colors, except when I don't, when I want them loud. So this is kind of a starting point for me on a lot of images, is plus 30 on Vibrance, minus 10 on saturation. And I like the way it looks here. It's kind of subtle. It's not a huge change. None of these changes that we've made so far are very big individually, but they've added up quite a bit, and I'll show you the total thing in just a minute. All right. I'm going to skip the color mixer for now. We also skipped tone curve. We won't really cover that in this class. And then we'll get down to effects. So I clicked on the triangle, the arrow pointing to the word effects, so I can get the effects I want here. I'm going to deal with the top 3 for right now. We'll come back and cover the bottom 2 another time. So we have texture, clarity, and dehaze. What do they do? Glad you asked. Texture is just like it sounds. It's going to make things that have texture. So like in this photo, it would be the wood on the door and the rock, the sandstone, I think, that makes up the pillars and the brick, the masonry. So if I turn it up, you'll see the wood texture shows up more, as well as the texture on the masonry. If I go to the left, it gets softer and blurrier. I don't want blurrier. I do want more texture. Texture is nice because it's kind of subtle. So I can turn it up quite a bit, especially in a photo like this, to about 40 or 50. Let's go to 40. Clarity. Clarity is I've heard it called the make it look better slider, especially on stuff like this. Not on people's faces. Doesn't work well on people's faces. But if I turn it up, it's kind of it's contrast and sharpness all at once, kind of, sort of. So it does get grittier, more dramatic. If I go this way, again, softer. I will turn up clarity a little bit, somewhere between, let's see what it looks good. About 50, what am I at? 15? Yeah, about 15. This is too much, in my opinion, for this photo. Feels a little too, almost not comic book, but like I'm in a Batman movie. So a little too dramatic. Batman. All right. Last one here we're going to talk about is dehaze. And dehaze is just like it sounds, especially on fog. It's amazing how you can look through fog with this filter. It'll sharpen up things as well, increase contrast, also makes things darker. Again, grittier, maybe dirtier. In this case, I go to the left and you get, looks like someone fogged up the front of your lens. Which way do I want to go? I'm going to add just a little bit of this, about 7 or 8. Not a lot, just a little bit. So, especially with texture, clarity, and dehaze, once you start adding if you go to the plus side on those, your image will tend to get just a little bit darker. So oftentimes what I'll do then, once I add those, is come back up to my exposure and just increase that by just a little bit to kind of offset that darkness. And it's usually whatever my exposure was at, I add about 0.3 to it. It feels good to me. So I was at 0.5, now I'm at 0.8, plus 0.8. Sounds like math, but it's not too bad. So let's see what we've done so far. So what I'm going to do is now that we've done the edits, let's take a look at where we started. So down here at the bottom, below the image, there's a set of, you have different views. Like you can fit it, you can fill it. I can see 1-to-1, so I can zoom in. This shows and hides the little thumbnail viewer, the film strip it's called. And then the last one over here, let's zoom back out. We want to go to fit. Last one over here, if you put your mouse over it, it should say show original. So here's where we started. Okay, so this is how it looked when we started before our edits, and this is how it looks now. So kind of muddy and dark and cold, and now it's warmer, sharper, dramatic, mysterious, and hopefully just a little bit more inviting. When you get more experience in Lightroom, this will take you 2-3 minutes per photo. Lightroom is not an application for saving and rescuing really bad photos. It's an application for finishing the story of your photo, adding the color maybe, changing exposure, cropping things that shouldn't be there. So that's what Lightroom is for. It's not going to rescue a terrible photo. All right, so we're going to get started on this photo. Here we go. So as usual, one of the first things I'll do is I'll look around the edge of the frame and take a look at things and see if there's anything that's kind of bugging me. And it's very, very minor, but on the bottom right corner, so over here, right over here, I've got a little bit of a cable or something that's in the photo that, at least for me, once I see it, I can't not see it. So I got to get rid of it. So I'm going to use the crop tool, and there we go, crop tool, and start at the top right because the problem's on the right-hand side, and just crop about into the middle of that. There's like 1, 2, 3, the third vertical line there. Once I've got that the way I like, I'm going to go ahead and hit the Enter key for, once I've got that where I like, I'm just going to go ahead and hit the Enter key to commit that change, and away we go. All right. So this image, really gray. It was a little bit of a blue sky day, but the exposure is just kind of in the middle to keep things nice and safe. So it's kind of flat, kind of muddy, not very dramatic. We're going to fix all that. So for this photo, I'm going to skip, to begin with, I'm going to skip the light panel section and come down here to the color. And I'm going to come down to color because it's so gray to start with. So let's start with color and see what happens. So the temperature, it was blue day. This building looks really cool when, that doesn't look cool. That's not what it looks like. Except when there's, never mind. Anyway, that's not what it looks like. Don't do that. So I'm going to go towards the blue. So I'm going to go take it to the left. Where do I stop? I'm just kind of eyeballing, and I'm at about 3,500 on the temperature there. Okay. The tint, usually, like I said, I kind of move them generally in the same direction. The tint is right now at plus 15, so it's kind of a little bit of purple. Pink plus blue makes purple. So I want to go with just a little to the left. So about -2, -3 on the tint. So it's just shift the blue just by adding green to it, just a little towards teal, which is a color I like. So there we go. Kind of subtle, hopefully. It doesn't feel like big hammer for editing. All right, so we get to the color panel, and one of the first things I want to do is, because it's so gray, I want to make it feel more like the blue sky day that it kind of was. So I'm going to take the temperature slider and go a little to the left. How much? I'll stop when it kind of looks good. All right, I'm about 3,563. The tint, it's currently to the warm side. I'm going to nudge it to the cooler side to get it away from a little bit of purple that's happening right now in the blues, and go just a little bit to the negative side, -3, -4, something like that. What that'll do is, by adding some green to the blues, make it a little bit more like teal color than a purple blue. So it's a color I prefer. Again, make the edit the way you want here. Vibrance, it's so gray, so gray. So let's turn the vibrance up. That's gonna help a bunch. I don't wanna go that much. And then come back. Here's a tip for how far to go with the sliders. Go, turn it up, or turn it down, either direction. Just go far and then, well, that feels like too much, and then back up until it feels like, oh, that's about right. That's one way to go. Just try that, see how it works for you. Saturation, I'm going to leave alone for now. So next, what I want to do is go back up to the exposure, the light panel, excuse me, and let's do some work there. So I'm going to leave the exposure alone for now. The overall brightness is okay. I want to deal with the individual zones after I turn up the contrast. So I'm going to turn the contrast up. How much? About 30 or 40. What that'll do is it'll bring a little more detail in the clouds, which I like. Also add a little drama down at the bottom. So we're moving away from that flat gray look and adding some blacks and some whites. So it's getting there. We're getting there. All right, highlights. What's that going to do in this photo? That's going to mostly be the clouds. So which way do I want to go? I'm going to actually pull it to the minus side because I want to turn that down just a little bit, about minus 25, 27. That'll, again, bring some of the details, hold that detail in the sky. The whites, let's see what happens, which direction I want to go. I'm going to turn that up just a little bit by about plus 15. Next up, we have shadows and blacks. So what I want to do with those, let's turn the shadows up, see what happens. I don't quite like that. That's a little much. I do like that direction though. The darker it's mostly in the bottom of the building, which helps draw your eye up by being dark there. So that's what I want. So about minus 30 feels good there. Blacks, which direction? I do like what it's doing here, so we'll go a little negative again. Not too much, because I don't want it to feel, again, too much like, a big hammer of edits. About minus 20 on the blacks. Let's go down. Oops, sorry. Let's go next to the effects. The three controls there we're using for right now. Texture, clarity, dehaze. So I'm going to turn the texture up. And what that's going to do, if you go to the left, it'll make things blurry. Or if you go to the right, it's going to bring out some of that detail in the in that grate, that kind of overhang, whatever it's called, which I kind of like. Also just adds a little bit of something to the clouds. Clarity, turn that up. You can see it gets pretty detailed and a little more dramatic, which is, that's a little too much. I tried to keep my clarity, especially when I've got a lot of sky in the photo, below 20 or 30, because in the sky is often where you'll have any kind of noise in your image, the blues. So if you turn up clarity, you're increasing the visibility of the noise. Dehaze is similar, which way? Ooh, dark and stormy, a little too much. But kind of the direction I want to go, so we'll turn that up a little bit. And again, now that I've turned these up, the whole image is just a little darker than I want, so I'm going to go back up to exposure and increase it about 0.3, give or take. There we go. And now I'm in a happy place with this photo. So again, this is 2 or 3 minutes of edits. That's where we started. That's where we're at now. 2-3 minutes. More and more experience you get, the faster you'll go. The other thing that happens, the more experience you'll get, is when you create a photo and you look at the back of your camera or your phone and you think, oh, that's not what I want. This will help you know, oh, but I know what I can do with it. I know I can take it where I want to go. So that's photo number 2. Let's do one more photo together. One more photo together. This guy, this church in London area. So I want to show you, first thing I want to do with this is fix, it's a little crooked. I thought the camera was straight, but it wasn't. So we're going to fix that. That's the first thing. Also, I kind of want to, it's not as symmetrical as I'd like, so we're going to fix that. We'll do both those things with the crop tool. Also, We're going to address some color and brightness things. Yeah, this photo is going to be pretty neat when we're done. So I'm going to click on the crop tool. And I'm going to straighten it first. So by straightening, you can see at the top here, that pillar is crooked. It's crooked. It's lower on the right. So the way you rotate, you straighten, is by taking your cursor outside of the frame, and then it turns into this kind of double hooked arrow. And you click and hold in that area outside. And then this case, I'm going to push up. So I'm on the right-hand side, so I want to bring the right-hand side up because it's too low. And it brings you this smaller grid so it's easier to see. And I want to make that level. Also going to check some verticals, make sure nothing else is wonky. So now it's straight, but it's still not centered the way I want. Also, now I've got this gap up here at the top that I don't like. It's that short headroom thing I don't like. I hate feeling like I'm bumping into stuff. So next what I'm going to do is grab the top right and just pull down until I hit the very top of that archway, I guess it is, in the top. And that has the advantage of kind of helping me center up this image. But I got this little gap right here, so I'm going to keep going just a little bit more. Till I hit that window, that'll kind of make it symmetrical over here. Nudge just a little bit back that way by clicking and dragging. I know, details, right? Details, crazy. Yeah, so that feels pretty good. Hit the enter key, the return key, and it feels better. Are we still a little crooked? Are we still a little crooked? Oops, that's not what I want. I want this. The keyboard shortcuts are a little different between this and Lightroom Classic. It was a little crooked still on the floor. All right. Sometimes you'll have, especially in old buildings, where one part is straight and the other part looks crooked, so you have to find the one that's most important. All right, there we go. So let's get into this image. It's too dark, it's too cold. Also, the windows are already too bright, so sometimes if there's a technical defect in my photo, I'll go ahead and embrace it. And here's what let me just show you what I mean by that. So the windows are too bright, but they kind of have this glow, which in a church kind of feels neat. So what I'm going to do is let's go to highlights and whites right away. And look at this. We can make that window and the outside ones too glow a little bit more. That's kind of fun. I'm about plus 45, 50 on the highlights. Are the whites going to do anything? Yeah, the whites just get a little crazy on this one, so I'm going to leave the whites alone. Shadows are the next thing I want to play with. I want to see a little bit underneath, so that's going to be under the chairs. I want it to feel like, hey, come in and have a seat. Feel welcoming, a little more welcoming. About plus 50 on the shadows. Pull the blacks down just a little bit. I'm jumping all over the place, sorry. This is how I edit. Turn the contrast up a little bit. Maybe add just a little exposure now. A little exposure. There you go. So I'm going to hop down to color now. The temperature is very cold because there was a lot of daylight coming in, which is a cool color. So I'm going to warm it up a little bit. Let's go to about 4,500. Oh, that feels better. It's like candlelight and firelight now. I'm going to leave the tint where it was there at about plus 24. Vibrance, I don't want to, it's already pretty saturated color, so I'm just going to leave those alone. I'm going to actually back this off to 4,000 on the color. Sorry, it's a little too obnoxious. And then I can turn Vibrance up a little bit, which will kind of get me back there. All right. The conversations I have with myself while I'm editing, you will have them too. Sometimes you'll speak out loud when you have them. Sometimes it'll just be in your head. That's okay. So, I'm going a little faster on this edit because this video is probably going too long anyway. So, texture, let's turn that up just because I like to. It's going to bring out some of this floor detail, which is actually, these are people's gravestones. In Europe, it's pretty common that churches, people are buried inside churches, and there's their gravestones or grave markers, and get used to it. Clarity, we'll turn that up a little bit. And Dehaze, am I going to do anything with that or not? I'm going to leave Dehaze alone. So, that was a quick edit. looking around. How am I doing? How am I feeling? I like it. I like it. So here's the before. That's where we started. Without the, it doesn't show, when you hit the before and after button, it's after, it shows you, it doesn't include the crop changes you made. That's what I need to say. It doesn't include the crop change, but it will show you all the other changes you made, in this case in light, color, and effects. So that's kind of a quick look at what you can do in Lightroom CC to import and edit photos. I really like Lightroom. I think it's a really powerful but pretty simple tool to use to get your photos to the place where they are finished, where they complete the story, especially if your camera is shooting this format called RAW, which we'll also cover. They tend to be flat and gray. They look like, like back like this. And they don't have this, but they give you a lot of room to edit to different stories of brightness and color. All right, there we go. So the next video, this concludes part 2 of Lightroom CC. The next video will be how to get these photos from Lightroom back to your computer in a saved version of these photos. So we will do that in the next video.